I got sick. I'm trying to put my life back together and kind of go on with my life such as it is. And to do that, I need to reconnect with certain people, really on a professional basis, people that I haven't talked to in 15 or even 20 years, but who can help me and who have shown some interest in helping me. But in order to reestablish that relationship, I need to explain what happened to me. And saying that I got sick is probably the simplest way of doing that. And there's also this question of how do I explain to my kids what happened, because I know there's a lot of confusion on their part. Things that have been said by the Archdiocese of St. Louis, among other people and organizations. Things that have been done to slander me and try to discredit me with both my kids, my family, and my former parish, Mary Queen of Peace. So for me to kind of reappear in public, I need to explain what happened, which is really just that I got sick. Essentially what happened is that, I had what back in the day would be described as a nervous breakdown. But it's more complicated. I had a nervous breakdown because I'm a survivor of the Catholic sex abuse crisis, and I had complex PTSD, and what happened to me as a child ended up affecting me deeply, especially as my kids, and particularly my boys, but I think also my girls, because my boys didn't serve, but my girls did serve. But because as my kids went through the age that I was when I started to get abused, 4th grade through 7th grade basically, I got sick. And it's still hard for me to come to terms with that and to say that, but I think I need to say that, and I need to get better at saying that. I need to do a better job of telling this story so that I can kind of reemerge from this shell, this cocoon that I'm in, if I want to get healthy and get some semblance of a life back. So I got sick. That's what happened. I'm a survivor of the Catholic sex abuse crisis. When I was a child, in the late 70s and the early 80s, I was sexually exploited, abused, and assaulted, ultimately raped by a priest named Father LeRoy Valentine. Abuse that was witnessed, at least in part, by my friend the Cardinal. And this is where Spotlight comes into play, and this is when I started to get sick. So if you've seen the movie Spotlight and you haven't, you should. I think it's appropriate to ask what happened next. Well, I am the answer to the question of what happened next after Spotlight. January 2002, the first Spotlight articles in the Boston Globe ran. That led to a lot of coverage in the Boston Globe, but also kicked off kind of national efforts to do similar Spotlight stories around the country. And somehow, I still don't know exactly how, but the New York Times ended up in my backyard of St. Louis, writing a story in early March 2002 about comparing and contrasting St. Louis and Belleville. And in that article, I think it was March 2nd, 2002, they named my favorite priest from my childhood, one of my favorite people from my childhood, Father LeRoy Valentine, as an abuser, which was news to me. And had needless to say, a devastating impact on me. In large part because my friend the Cardinal told me nothing happened. So Spotlight's early January 2002, just a few weeks later, less than 2 months later, in March 2002, the New York Times runs a piece that names my favorite priest, Father LeRoy Valentine, as an abuser. I immediately I went to the circuit attorney's office, I went to the press, and then I also called the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and my friend the Cardinal called me back. And long story short, he told me nothing happened. That it was impossible that anything could have happened. God, and I'm getting a headache just talking about this. It's the worst. And I was struggling at that point, but I didn't know why. I moved back to St. Louis for good, basically 5 years prior. We moved back to St. Louis in '97, in July of '97, so that my now ex-wife could spend time with her dad, he had a life-threatening, ended up being life-shortening disease, polycystic kidney disease, and she wanted to be around him, and she wanted the kids to grow up knowing him, and I was fine with that. I thought that was a great idea. Plus, I was not thrilled with the company, the startup I was working for. So we moved back to St. Louis in July of '97. And I pretty much immediately started getting sick in terms of having psychological problems, anxiety problems, PTSD, complex PTSD, those kinds of things. I didn't know it at the time. I just knew that I was having problems with depression. So I went to college in Texas and was really almost completely fine until the last year, maybe even just the last semester, when the prospect of moving back to St. Louis started triggering me and I started having depression problems. I did have depression problems in the summers that I would move back, but then they'd go away as soon as I'd leave St. Louis, which was really kind of weird because I thought it was a seasonal affective disorder, but it's really kind of a reverse seasonal affective disorder. I was abused as a child and I was just getting triggered during the summer. It's not complicated, being home for the summer. But then I would go back to Texas for school, and then everything was fine, largely fine, until probably the last summer of college, or the last semester of college, when the prospect of moving back to St. Louis started to trigger me, and some of the stuff, some of the gender confusion, that kind of stuff, started following me back to Texas. But for 3.5 years in Texas, I was completely fine. I did end up kind of going back and forth I moved back to San Antonio, and then a year later I ended up moving back to Austin. I was just trying to, it wasn't just that I was chasing a girl, my now ex-wife. I was chasing a feeling. I just felt differently in Texas than I did in St. Louis, and I didn't know why. I just knew that I did feel different. It wasn't until we moved back for grad school for both of us in '92, the summer of '92, that I started having problems with depression. This is probably late '92, early '93, like January, February '93, that I ended up seeing a doctor. Went to the student health service at WashU, got the book Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy, was diagnosed with depression, went to Dr. Butler, who gave me Prozac. Now that was a problem because I was a newlywed, and Prozac gave me nasty sexual problems, so I ended up having to drop that and just kind of dealing with the depression. But that's one of the narratives that's out there, is that I never sought help for this, and that's not true. As soon as I started having problems, I sought help for this. Well, the first ways that I sought help was I got the hell out of Missouri. I moved to San Antonio first in January '91, and then in January '92 I moved to Austin. That's how I first sought help, was I got out of St. Louis. When I was committed to St. Louis via grad school, I ended up going to the student health services at WashU for depression for reasons I didn't understand. Again, I thought it was seasonal affective disorder or something like that. I hadn't spent a winter in St. Louis in a while, and I thought that was getting me down. And basically the longer I spent in St. Louis, the more I had problems with depression. And I saw, it wasn't until, so we ended up moving to Texas. I ended up working for Anderson Consulting and then Ernst & Young. I think I was busy enough, and I had a newborn, that I was having problems, but I wasn't in a position to deal with them. I was having more problems with depression. I didn't know what was going on, and I really just kind of blew it off. And being a newlywed and having a newborn is very distracting, and I just kind of distracted my way out of it. It wasn't until we moved to Arizona for basically a year and a half, and again, just like in Texas, all the problems just went away. All the depression just went away. Poof, it just went away. Then we moved back to St. Louis in the summer of '97, and that's when the depression really started hitting me. I think because I committed to St. Louis. I committed to staying and raising my family in St. Louis. I think it was the act of committing to St. Louis that really affected me. So then I started having problems with depression. We moved into our house on Nancy Carroll, and I saw at least 2 therapists there. One was the woman who was in downtown Kirkwood, just south of downtown Kirkwood. Then there was another woman behind the IHOP on Manchester. So I saw those 2 therapists. This is 98, 99, and I can date that because we were living in the house on Nancy Carroll. There was another therapist, the Tempo Medical Building up on Olive. I saw him. So that's like, so he was like the 4th therapist that I'd seen by the year 2000. And, we're having babies every year or year and a half or so we're busy and we're very distracted. But the more time I spent in St. Louis, the more this feeling, it was depression, plus it was gender confusion, and it was just a lot of stuff to deal with, a lot of stuff going through my head, and I was developing an anxiety problem due to PTSD and complex PTSD. And it's that anxiety problem that caused a lot of my problems, and it really started to manifest itself in 2000, 2001, when I was trying to do something entrepreneurial, but I just couldn't. I couldn't stand to be alone was the biggest thing. Being alone was one of my biggest triggers, which makes sense because the feeling of being alone is one of the things relevant to my post-abuse situation. It's that feeling. One of my biggest triggers is the feeling of being alone. So how am I supposed to get anything done when I can't stand to be alone, or when I can't stand to be in silence and quiet that I need? Because I may have some level of ADHD. I don't know whether I actually have ADHD. It may just be PTSD stuff. But I can be very anxious, and it can be very hard for me to concentrate. I need a highly structured environment for me to be able to be productive. And I went to other therapists to try to deal with that, because that was becoming more and more of a problem. Particularly when 2002 and Spotlight and the Father Valentine stuff started to blow up. And, it only makes sense in retrospect, but, it was also as my kids were getting older, as my oldest was getting older and started to pass through the ages that I was when I was abused. He went to Catholic school, and he was kind of following my footsteps, and that was kind of creeping me out without my realizing it. So 2002, I ended up going to the Archdiocese of St. Louis. My friend the Cardinal called me back, gave me a clean bill of health, told me it was impossible, that my memories didn't mean anything. And he didn't do any investigation or anything. And really, the really kind of difficult thing about that is that I was not the only person who came forward in March 2002. There was at least 2 others. I found a document that proves the existence of the second guy, and then I actually know and have talked to at length the third guy. My friend the Cardinal had 3 allegations against Father LeRoy Valentine, and actually they moved to permanently remove Father Valentine in late March 2002, and my friend the Cardinal never circled back to me to say, hey, I've got 3 allegations, maybe your memories do in fact mean something. He never did that. He just kind of, gave me the brush off and sent me on my way, gave me a happy story, told me nothing happened, and sent me on my way. So then I started to get even more sick, as my kids are going through the same age, they're serving, they're third grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. I started having problems. Then my oldest makes his first confession, I have a panic attack. My older son makes his first confession, I have a panic attack. My older daughter makes her first confession, I have a panic attack. That's relevant because my abuse started in confession, in face-to-face confession. It migrated into serving and into the sacristy and that kind of stuff, but it started during face-to-face confession. But I'd been given a clean bill of health for my friend the Cardinal, and so it basically took me 10 years to circle back to considering whether any of the Catholic stuff meant anything. It wasn't until 2010, 2011 that I started to consider whether the Catholic stuff was actually relevant, whether something had in fact happened to me, despite what my friend the Cardinal said. And I was seeing a therapist every year or every two, because the longer I spent in St. Louis, the more agitated I would get. The gender confusion stuff would come up, and the gender confusion stuff is tied to my abuse, because I didn't understand how and why a man would do that to a boy unless he thought he was a girl, and I just thought that meant that I was a girl. If a priest thinks you're a girl, then obviously you're a girl. That's how we thought about priests at the time. But I never talked about anyone with that. And when I had issues, this came up once. In fourth grade, I started acting out. This is shortly after the face-to-face confession abuse, and then there was another incident at the rectory, the Riskin pizza party. I started acting out, and my fourth grade teacher saw that, went to my mom, and unfortunately my parents never took me to see a child psychologist. A therapist once asked me, "What did your doctor say?" And I said, what do you mean?" And he said, when your parents took you to the doctor for this acting out stuff, what did your therapist say? And I never went to a doctor. My dad went to the library and read some books and said that I was fine. He said he thought that I was fine. My dad was a lawyer, not a child psychologist or therapist, and he's not good on the psychology stuff. So that's, needless to say, that's very difficult to handle, knowing that there was a warning given and that they disregarded it. So 2003, my older son makes his first confession, I have a panic attack. 2005, my older daughter makes her first confession, I have a panic attack. And then that's when I really started to get sick. I had a nervous breakdown, what back in the day would be called a nervous breakdown. I just became withdrawn. It's actually frustrating to know that at work, they described me as having become, quote, catatonic. People saw what was going on, they just didn't do anything about it. They just laid me off without any... nobody ever asked me if I was doing okay, why I was so withdrawn, why I was always with myself. That was very difficult. So I was laid off in late June 2007 in the summer. I tried to write a book. I had tried to write a book before in 2002, actually, that didn't go well. I did actually get some stuff done. So I was laid off again in 2001, in the aftermath of September 11th. Got some severance and that kind of stuff, and actually was able to get a fair bit of stuff done. This is the Paradox of Pain book, the pain stuff. But then Spotlight hit in 2002, and that just destroyed me. I didn't realize that it destroyed me, but it did destroy me. So then things really started to get scary. I was having all these anxiety problems. I was having all this PTSD stuff, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to call it. I called it depression, and I was trying to see people. I saw a number of people. I saw Julie at Catholic Family Services. I saw Dr. Tamarin, and then I saw Dr. Oakes. And then after that, it was Doug, Dr. Majeski, and Marilyn. So I've seen at least 10, depending on how you count, close to 15 different therapists. But so what happened in 2008, when I really, really, really started to get sick, beyond the anxiety stuff and the depression stuff, when things started to get scary, was the summer of 2008. And so the kids were out of town with Laura and her family. They went to a dude ranch. This is early June 2008. And what happened is, I remember I was driving around downtown Clayton, and I ended up having this feeling that I wanted to kill people, which I'd never had before, and obviously, which is very scary. It was a PTSD thing. It was a fear thing. I think what happened is, I hadn't been away from the kids, like, ever, for more than like a weekend. And now all of a sudden I was going to be away from them for 2 weeks. And the prospect of not being able to protect them, not being around them for 2 weeks, completely destroyed me and freaked me out. And it scared the living shit out of me. This is June 2008. And I ended up having a panic attack, and for whatever reason, that fear felt like anger. And that scared me and terrified me, and I started worrying that I was having paranoid schizophrenia, some other serious psychiatric problem. And again, remember, I couldn't attribute any of this to the Catholic stuff, because my friend the Cardinal had given me a clean bill of health, and it wasn't until, it wouldn't be another 3 years or so, 2 or 3 years, that I would start even considering the Catholic stuff. I'd been given the clean bill of health by my friend the Cardinal in 2002, so by 2008, I knew it wasn't the Catholic stuff. I just thought I was going crazy. So I just started to isolate myself. I locked myself in the room, and that was the only way I could control my thoughts and not have this anger stuff, which was actually fear. It felt like anger, but I think it was actually fear was what was going on. But when I say I got sick, that's what I mean. And the problem is that I was seeing psychologists. I was having these horrible, horrible anxiety problems, and unfortunately, the therapists I was seeing were incompetent. It wasn't until I saw Doug and Dr. Majeski, and that's like 2010, 2011, 2012, that they started diagnosing me properly. But from 2002 to 2010, I was misdiagnosed. I got sick. I tried to get help, and I was misdiagnosed until 2010, 2011, when I finally came across Doug and then Dr. Majeski, and we figured out what was going on, that I'd been lied to about the Catholic stuff, that I was a survivor of the Catholic sex abuse crisis. But the problem was, by then, the damage is done. I'd lost my family, I'd mostly lost my friends, I'd lost my marriage, and it had just become withdrawn. And that wasn't helped at all. I just the baseball stuff for me is a way of retreating back into the past, into a happier time. And I did it compulsively. I was good at it and was able to make money off of the baseball stuff, but it was completely compulsive. I wasn't able to do the innovation stuff. It turns out that there is some crossover, and I think I'll be able to apply some of what I learned from the baseball stuff to the innovation stuff. And it's nice to be able to work at a major league level and to work at a super high level. That's very helpful in terms of understanding high level performance and innovation stuff. But I effectively wasted 5 to 10 years on the baseball stuff, just obsessively. I retreated into the baseball stuff. That was how I, quote unquote, dealt with my problems, was by retreating and losing myself in the baseball stuff, which, it was an addiction. I wasn't addicted to drugs or alcohol, but the baseball stuff served the same purpose. It gave me an escape. At least I was able to accomplish something, and it was something productive, and I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't see it as an addiction. But that's what happened with the baseball stuff. And I'm still trying to break free of it. This is July 2022, and I'm still dealing with kind of compulsions, anxieties related to the baseball stuff, compulsive need to do the baseball stuff. Because it goes back to a happier time. When I was a child and obsessed with baseball, that's when I was happy, and then my abuse started during that obsessed with baseball time. And I think there's just this tight link between feelings of abuse and the baseball stuff. It's just kind of connected. Baseball triggers the abuse, and the abuse stuff triggers the baseball stuff. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put my life back together, and in order to do that, I have to explain to people exactly what happened. And really, what happened is I got sick. I tried to get help from the Archdiocese of St. Louis in 2002, and unfortunately my friend the Cardinal sent me on a 10-year wild goose chase, and it wasn't until 2010 or 2011 that I was able to start to figure out what was going on, thanks to Doug and Dr. Majeski, and then also Marilyn to a degree. But that took time. I was having money problems. My dad really doesn't believe in therapy and was reluctant to pay for things, so I was kind of on and off, having to figure things out for myself. And, you know, in figuring things out yourself, yes, I'm smart enough to figure it out, but it takes time. It took 10 years in my case. And I still have anxiety problems that I don't know how to deal with. But I think I have now an explanation that I can take to professional people and basically just kind of explain what happened. Now, the problem is that I still have the anxiety problems. I have really bad anxiety problems. You know, what would be labeled as procrastination, productivity problems are actually anxiety problems. I still have an untreated anxiety disorder, PTSD, complex PTSD related to my abuse as a child, which really gets worse at certain times of the year, especially in the summer, 4th of July, back to school, and then the week between Christmas and New Year's are the worst times of the year for me. It's one of the reasons I'm recording this now, is I can't do anything else, or it's hard for me to do anything else productive, so I can at least talk about the Catholic stuff and put down on tape what I've processed previously. But what I'm doing now in July 2022 is I'm trying to put my life back together. And to do that, I have to explain what happened. I have to have a story for what happened and why I'm not dangerous anymore. A story that I can tell both myself and other people about why I'm not dangerous. This is why I had those really terrifying thoughts. This is why what happened in June 2008, the fear of killing people, the desire to kill people, why that hit me, what that was, why that's no longer a problem. And it really is no longer a problem. I haven't had anything like that happen to me in 10 years or so, but it basically took me 10 years to get to the point where I could feel like I wasn't going crazy, that I did know what was going on. I had a nervous breakdown as a result of PTSD and complex PTSD, and I still have anxiety problems, but I know what happened to me in June 2008. I'm not a dangerous person. I don't represent a threat to myself or to anyone else, which kind of inadvertently is something that the Catholic Church helped me figure out by sicking the Shrewsbury police on me in February 2018 and again in April or May of 2018 with the Webster Groves police. The Catholic Church has said a lot of things to people that I'm dangerous, that I'm a threat to people, to myself and to other people. And it at least helps that I've been able to have those conversations with the police and convince them that I'm not a threat, that convinces me that I'm not a threat, because I don't have the thoughts, I don't have the fear/anger, anger/fear stuff now, and I haven't had that in years like I did in 2008, so it doesn't scare me. I know what happened. I know why that happened. But the problem is that I wasn't able to get help. I never got help from the Catholic Church. Therapy, they don't do anything to help survivors. I had to figure that out all out on my own, and that took 10 or 20 years for me to figure this out. But now it's July 2022 and I'm trying to put my life together, and to do that I have to explain what happened. And you know, fundamentally I got sick. I'm a survivor of the Catholic sex abuse crisis. Horrible things happened to me when I was a child, and I had reactions to that. And I think it's going to be hard for people to understand that. Easier for some than others. Maybe hard for my kids, especially because I think my kids have been told lies about exactly what happened. I did try to get help. Over and over again, to the extent that I could, based on money. You know, money problems were an issue. Catholic Church never helped me. My parents were reluctant to pay for therapy because my dad didn't really believe in it. He didn't understand the severity of things. My mom didn't understand the severity of things. So it's just taken me that long to get healthy, or even to just start to get healthy. But you know, I'm here in July 2022 trying to get better, trying to get on with my life, trying to move forward with my life. And the point of this video is to advance that process and try to get things back together.